Welcome everybody to another webinar by Dr. Donald Martin. And this is the series of webinars we are doing on undergraduate degree in United States. And in these webinars, we are going to discuss a lot of things which comes directly from the experience of Dr. Donald Martin. You may not be getting such type of information anywhere in the internet or visiting any of the university website. So just let me again introduce Dr. Donald Martin. He was a former Dean of Admissions and Dean of Students at the Columbia University, University of Chicago, Northwestern University, and Wheaton College. And you will be knowing Columbia University is the Ivy League University, and the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, which is rated by US News. This is the #1 business school in the United States. He has from 1980 to 2008 is a big experience, more than 1,25,000 applications. He has evaluated, he has given the decisions, he has provided the complete insight, and more than double number of even letter of recommendations and other things he has evaluated. And we are going to, as we move forward in more and more details, we'll be talking and we'll be getting the really insight into the experience of Dr. Donald Martin. And he has, since 2018, will be working with the student across different countries. He's also a columnist at US News World Report and a regular speaker at large number of the universities, institutions across the globe. And that is what is the makes really, and we have been working with Dr. Donald Martin, astute, and Donald Martin, we have more than a decade worth of, he has been really a great source of inspiration for the student, helping completely in admission process. So with this, in a brief introduction, let's me invite Dr. Donald Martin to take this forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dioris. Hello, everyone. Once again, if you are joining us perhaps for the second time, since our first webinar in this series was last month on July 13th, welcome back. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome to you as well. We are delighted to have you here. My colleague, Ms. Deborah Zakarian, is with me today, and she will be presenting a portion of our webinar today as well. Ms. Debbie has a wealth of background also, perhaps not as long as mine, but she has definitely had some experience working with undergraduate applicants and is actually working with me very closely this year as we work with our astute high school students on their application processes. So Ms. Debbie, it's great to have you back, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in a few moments. Now, what I'd like to do is share with you what we're going to be discussing today. There are several general aspects of considering applying for admission to colleges and universities in the United States that we believe would be very important to you to consider here at the early stages of your application process. These are things to keep in mind as you continue to move forward. Those of you who are listening in today who may be in the 12th standard and you're going to be applying to start your undergraduate education in the fall of 2024 next year, or if you are further back, you might be in the 11th standard or the 10th standard. Wherever you are, these things are very important for you to consider. Things such as, what are some myths about undergraduate study in the United States? In other words, what are some things that some folks think may be true, but really aren't true? What is the biggest mistake prospective students make? This happens every year in every country around the world, including the United States. This is a big mistake. How do you plan ahead? What are some things to keep in mind as you're beginning now to get ready to start working on your applications? Ms. Debbie is going to join me and talk about 7 ways to be positively noticed as an applicant. These are genuine ways to help yourself stand out. I will pick it back up and talk about 7 ways you don't want to be noticed. In fact, we call them the 7 deadly sins. Then we're going to spend a little time discussing certain aspects of the application. We will be going into these in greater detail, by the way, in our 3 upcoming webinars. One in September, one in October, one in November. We hope you'll definitely decide to join us for those as well. But I want to talk a little bit today about essays, recommendations, academics and test scores, and what happens if you get a response from an admissions committee and are waitlisted or denied. What do you do? Is that the end of the world? No, it is not by any means. So we're going to talk about that as well. Then just a few final words before we go into what Ms. Debbie and I would think to Dr. Dioris as well. Our favorite part of any webinar is the questions that we receive at the end. We always get excellent questions. There are no bad questions, no dumb questions. If you want to know something, we want you to ask. So as we go through the presentation, keep track of your questions, or there's a question and answer section right here on this platform. If you have a question as we go along, please type it in. And at the end of the presentation, Dr. Dioris has kindly agreed to monitor the questions and ask us, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can. So please ask questions. That's my favorite part of all of this. Okay, let's start with some myths about undergraduate study in the United States. What's the first one? Well, some will say, my high school academic record is not good enough. Therefore, I won't be considered for admission in the United States to a college or university there. Well, that's not quite the case. There are certain experiences that high school students go through during their 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th standard, or in our country, during 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, that can absolutely affect someone's academic performance. These are valid experiences. Perhaps someone got very sick during their 10th standard. They weren't able to go to school or to do what they would normally do. Perhaps someone lost a loved one, a parent, an aunt or uncle, a sibling, a close friend who passed away suddenly. There may have been financial hardships that all of a sudden occurred that were not expected. In other words, there are things that happen in life that can affect our ability, understandably so, to focus on our academics. So if your academic record is not absolutely at the top of the chain, so to speak, we can help you with that. If you certainly were choosing to work with Astute Academy, we could help you work with this, because there are understandable, if you could see during those years Dr. Dioris mentioned that I was working as a dean of admissions at places like Columbia or the University of Chicago or Northwestern, Wheaton, wherever. I admitted students with a wide range of undergraduate GPAs or high school GPAs. It wasn't all the 99th percentile or the 4.0 GPAs that were admitted. Many of those individuals were denied. This is not the only way to help yourself stand out as an applicant. So don't be too concerned if your high school record is not exactly what you might want it to be, especially if you have what is considered a valid explanation for that, which we would be more than willing to help you share in your application. Number 2, it is only worth enrolling if I am admitted to a top-ranked program. Well, I could spend an hour discussing this part of things alone. I could spend a whole webinar talking about this issue of rankings. Now, please don't get me wrong. There are some outstanding universities in the United States, and they have been given correct attention for the outstanding programs that they offer. But that said, there are 3,000 to 4,000, did you hear that? 3,000 to 4,000 accredited institutions in the United States of America. So logic would suggest that you can't just say that there are only 5 or 10 universities worth your time out of this large number of accredited, outstanding universities. And some folks get very concerned if they don't get into a top 10 program. They start feeling like they've failed in some way, or all hope is lost. That is simply not true. Yes, you can look at the top institutions, but as you do your research, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you need to be a little bit less focused on just the top 10 or the top 15. There are at least, out of 3,000 to 4,000 accredited institutions in the United States, there are at least a couple hundred, at least 300 to 500 that would be very, very much worth your time and would be very, very helpful to you in your ultimate career pursuits. So please do not limit yourself by saying, and their rankings are very unreliable, to be honest with you. The methodology is poor, and oftentimes they are done to sell magazines or newspapers. That's what's behind this, is to try to get you to buy the publication. And so we have to be very careful how much emphasis you really place. Many students have gone to these top ranked programs and been very disappointed. So don't make that mistake, okay? And I should have put the 3 major myths at the top of this slide. I apologize. That should be 3 rather than 4. But nonetheless, our third is a myth that sometimes international students especially have a perception that the United States has an unending supply of free money, scholarships, fellowships, grants, whatever it might be, stipends. And yes, there is financial aid available, no doubt about it. But most colleges and universities, certainly at the undergraduate level, when you get to the master's degree level and certainly to the doctoral level, yes, there is a lot more scholarship available. But at the undergraduate level, there's a limited number of scholarships that are given. There's a limited number of grants or fellowships. So you need to take this into account. And when you're doing your research, make sure you understand exactly what is offered by the institution and what is not offered, so that you are not surprised later down the road. Okay, please keep these 3 myths in mind. My feeling is none of them are true. None of them are accurate. So please keep this in mind as you continue to move forward with your college plans. Now, what do you think? I'm going to just give you a couple seconds here. If I were to ask you one-on-one, if I were to meet with you privately, just in a conference call or a Zoom call like we're doing now, and I said to you, what do you believe is the biggest mistake prospective college students make? What do you think you might say to me? Do you have any, what might you say? What would be your response? Well, after 40 some years working in this industry, 28 of those years as a full-time dean of admissions, all those years, this happens every single year with every country around the world, starting with the United States. So that means it happens in India too. The biggest mistake prospective college students make is not doing adequate research before they apply. This means that students do not take the time to do good research about the programs they are thinking about. Oftentimes here in the United States, prospective students only rely on two criteria, shall we say. The first, word of mouth. They listen to somebody else tell them, oh, this school is wonderful, they're the best, you should go there. And the second is rankings. That's the only 2 ways they determine where they're going to apply. Please don't let that happen to you. Please, if you don't take anything else away from this webinar today, please write these couple things down that I'm about to share with you. They could make a world of difference in your undergraduate experience. I can attest to that, having worked with so many students for whom their undergraduate experience did not turn out the way they hoped it would, and largely because they did not do adequate research before. This is your chance to do this right now. So how do you do this? Well, let's talk about this. First of all, remember, this is about finding the best match for you, not your parents, not your high school instructor or advisor, not your friends. I'm not saying their input is not useful. Of course it is. But you're the one that's going to be possibly coming across the ocean to study in the United States. This is your education. This is about finding the best match for you. Start out with at least 10 to 15 options. When Ms. Debbie and I do some shortlisting with Astute for our undergraduate applicants, we will send a list of perhaps as many as 40 or 50 options to consider. 40 or 50. That's one of the services that we're able to provide for you should you elect to work with Astute. We can help you to expand that list of options, and you might find one you never thought of before that could be the very perfect institution for you. As you get your options prepared, create a spreadsheet and find out as much as you can about these options and record it on your spreadsheet. Take the time to do this. As I said, don't rely only on, what did I say? Word of mouth or rankings. Make sure you're prepared for what standardized tests you're going to need to take. Start working on your personal statement now. You don't have to have it all finalized, but at least beginning, most applicants will use, I'm sure you're familiar with, or you will become familiar with, the common application. There's a general essay for the common application that you'll be asked to prepare. So you could start thinking about what you'd like to write for that essay. You could do that ahead of time. Make sure you have good recommenders. I'll be mentioning this later in the presentation. This is critical. And obviously, make sure that you keep track of your application deadlines. This is the way to prepare ahead of time. Getting it done ahead of time before you apply. This is critical. If you follow these steps, I can guarantee you're going to have a larger number of options, and there's a much stronger likelihood that you're going to choose a university that is a good match and where you're going to be happy. And that's what you're only going to do this once. Most individuals do not get 2 and 3 and 4 undergraduate degrees. They get 1. So make sure you take the time to think ahead, plan ahead, most of all, do your research. Okay, Ms. Debbie is now going to join me for the next portion of the presentation, during which we're going to share with you 7 ways to truly be positively noticed as an applicant. So, Ms. Debbie, I turn the microphone over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Don. And let's continue with our webinar and talk about ways to be positively noticed. We know that as you're applying to undergraduate study, there may be hundreds or even thousands of applicants. So you want to do everything in your ability to be positively noticed. Well, the first way, as you see on your screen, is to simply follow directions. Now, that may seem easy to do, but as you go through various different programs and applications, directions may change. And you really need to take your time and do your due diligence to give each institution and each admissions committee what they are asking for. For example, if they ask you for a 400 to 500 word essay, you would not want to give them 380 words or give them more, 550 words. If they ask you for 2 letters of recommendation, you would not want to provide them with 3 unless you reach out to them and ask them to make an exception. And this brings up a good point. It is okay to ask questions and get clarification on things. This looks positive on your behalf, but you want to show each institution that you are truly following the directions throughout the application process. Number 2, the second way to be positively noticed, and this is so important, and Dr. Don just alluded to this, and this is to use good recommenders. I was just researching a program at a very prestigious school the other day, and right on their website, they talked about how a good letter of recommendation really elevates your application. It can explain a drop in your GPA or perhaps a test score that wasn't as good. And who is a good recommender? I think we should talk about that. A good recommender is someone who knows you in 2 ways. This person has known you long enough and they know you well enough. They've known you for a duration of time and they've been with you and interacted with you in many circumstances. This is not someone that you met a few weeks ago at a conference, or perhaps a family member introduces you to someone and says, this is a good contact for you. This is someone who really and truly knows you. And the reason for this is they have to be able to provide evidence in their letter about you and give specifics. For example, a letter of recommendation, they may ask to provide strengths and weaknesses about you. And they can say, these are the qualities that we appreciate in this person. And as far as a negative quality, it wouldn't be anything bad. They would perhaps say, well, John is an excellent team member. He works very diligently, but sometimes he's a little impatient. So he's working on that. Or Sally is a very type A, an organized personality, but sometimes she has trouble with change and she's learning to be more flexible. So the better a recommender knows you, the more genuine letter they can write. And a good letter of recommendation is so hard to find. This really elevates your application. So take time in choosing your recommenders. Okay, number 3. Be reasonably creative throughout your application process. Now, we realize there aren't tons of ways to do this, and you certainly don't want to go overboard. For example, telling excessive jokes at an interview or sending attachments with your application or perhaps other things to be noticed. But you do want to try through your writing, through your emails, through your interaction via a Zoom interview or interview in person, that you're really letting your personality shine through and letting the admissions committee get to know who you are. So do your best to be reasonably creative. Number 4, and this is a very basic thing which I'm doing or trying to do right now, and that is to smile. A smile is so important. It connects people together. It brightens the mood. It lightens the space, and it also breaks the ice during an interview. And with so much of our technology being online via Zoom or FaceTime or WhatsApp, where we see the other person, a smile and a positive attitude is so important. You can even smile when you're speaking with someone on the phone. Let's say you're speaking with me and you call my office. If I first answer the phone and say, "Good morning, this is Ms. Zakarian," or if I choose to answer the phone with a smile and I say, "Good morning, this is Ms. Zakarian," you can see when I smile, my face changes and my voice lightens, and it makes the other person on the other end of the line feel more welcome and feel more connected. You can also smile through your written word. A lot of correspondence through the application process is done via email. When you're writing an email, let's say you're reaching out to an admissions director to get clarification on something. Before you just plow right into your question, you can start by saying "Good morning" or "I hope you're doing well," and finish your correspondence with "I hope you have a good week." Little positive things that help your personality to shine through and help you to connect with the person on the other end. Number 5, ask good questions. Good questions are so important because they show that you as the applicant have done your research. You've done your homework. You are trying to get further clarification about something, and it communicates your genuine interest. Try not to ask questions such as, when is your application deadline? Or how many scholarships does your institution offer? These types of things you can find in your research. Keep your questions to be for clarification and also help to demonstrate that you've done your research and you're looking for additional information. Number 6, and this is so very important, keep your cool no matter what. The admissions process is stressful, and just as you and I are human beings and we can make mistakes, things happen at admissions offices too. Sometimes, as we know, technology works, and sometimes it does not. Sometimes the mail is received, and sometimes it is not. So you always want to give the other party the benefit of the doubt. We've had students whose test scores never made it to the institution, or letters of recommendation were not received. I know of a student who had done excellent applications for some very prestigious schools. He had heard from all of the schools except one, had not heard anything back, and 2 months after he had interviews and talked to the other schools, he was called for an interview. He was so nervous, he didn't know what had happened. But you know what? During the interview, the admissions director apologized, and they said, we don't know what happened to your application. It may have been misplaced. And they conducted the interview. They were so impressed with his application and also the way he handled things that not only did they admit him right on the spot, which is almost unheard of, they gave him an amazing scholarship, and he actually chose to attend that institution. And the final point today is to communicate your strong interest in the institution. This is so important as you move through the application process. Whether you're communicating with admissions directors via email or on the phone or in person, doing your research and letting the admissions offices know that you are truly interested in their program and why you would be a good match for them. These are just some of the ways that you can be positively noticed as an applicant. I'm sure there are more, and we truly believe if you practice these, even though you may not be admitted to every program or every institution that you apply to, you certainly will be noticed in a favorable way. Well, thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Don to discuss some of the things you don't want to do throughout the application process.
Thanks so much, Ms. Debbie. That was excellent. What a tremendous amount of helpful information for our audience. And these truly do make a difference. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, these will make a difference. I promise you. Now, please don't feel like I'm putting pressure on anyone, but I don't see any questions yet in the Q&A box on the platform here. If you have any questions at all about anything we've said so far, maybe you disagree with something or you need more clarification on something we've said, please write those questions in that box. We would love to answer them at the conclusion of the presentation. Okay, now we're going to switch gears. We're going to go from 7 ways to get positively noticed to 7 ways you do not want to be noticed. Because if you are noticed in these ways, the likelihood is you're going to be denied admission. First of all, obviously, dishonesty. Now, I don't believe any applicant anywhere in the world is a bad person at all when they consider being dishonest in their application. What I think happens is that many applicants feel as though, well, you know, I don't have the best grades, or I don't have very many extracurricular activities in my high school experience. I didn't really get involved very much, or my test scores, I just don't know that I'm going to be as desirable a candidate. And so I'll just change my GPA slightly, or I'll add a bunch of activities that I really didn't do just so I'm competitive. That's an understandable concern. Yes, many applicants have that concern, but that's where it needs to stop. You do not want to respond to that concern by doing something dishonest. Admissions offices today in the US and around the world are getting more and more able to determine if someone has been honest or not. And if it is discovered that maybe you wrote your own letter of recommendation instead of the individual you asked to write it, or someone else prepared your essays, or on and on. If there is dishonesty and it is discovered, that unfortunately is going to mean that you will be denied, and your name will probably be kept in their records as someone not to deal with ever again. In fact, when I worked at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, if we discovered that an applicant had cheated in some way on his or her application, we notified some of our sister business schools about that. So be very careful. The temptation might be there. There's nothing wrong with being tempted. We all are. But you just don't want to act on that. Number two, too much contact with the admissions office. As Ms. Debbie said earlier, if you have a question, you want to clarify something, you would like to ask if you could possibly send a third letter of recommendation in a certain situation, that's fine, no problem. But we used to hear from students every week that were just wanting to kind of check in. Hello, I just thought I'd say hello and let you know that I still very much want to come to your school. And then next week, hello again, I'm just checking in. Way too much. You want to contact the admissions office when they ask you to contact them, or when they've reached out to you, of course, you're going to respond. Or if you have some specific questions that you really need to ask. Other than that, be careful that too much contact makes you look a little bit desperate, actually. Thirdly, not following directions. We've already talked about this. Please make sure you do what you're asked. And sometimes applicants may not always understand, well, why are they asking me to do this? Or that doesn't make any sense. Well, it may not make sense to you, but if they're asking you to do it, then you need to do it. Number four, rude or arrogant behavior. Now, let me talk about this for a moment. Here again, I think what happens sometimes is that applicants are told, you need to really stand out. You need to be confident. You need to let them know that you're very much interested in their program, that you believe you can do it. To the point that without even maybe realizing it, an applicant can come across as very arrogant or very conceited and say something like, well, I was the best person on my volleyball team, and if it had not been for me, we wouldn't have won our championship. Or I was the perfect student in my 12th standard year, and I received all the best marks, and no one else in my class did that. That may be true, but those things, if you say it like that, you're going to turn off the admissions committee. The person who should be saying those kinds of things about you is who? Your recommenders. They're the ones who can sing your praises. Now, so what you want to focus on is you want to be confident and assertive, but not conceited and arrogant. If you work with us at Astute, we can help with this. Obviously, rude behavior, being rude, being mean, being sarcastic, being short, yelling at someone, obviously does not help you. And I only put this here because, believe it or not, this happens often. Applicants get very upset about things, or they get very angry, or they don't smile. They're not very open and kind and easy to talk with. That will make a difference, especially with institutions that have thousands of applicants. Number five, sending the wrong or non-proofed information. Please be careful as you prepare your essays, especially, or whatever it is you're being asked to send to a particular institution. Make sure that's the one you send. I used to get essays for Columbia, and the student would say in the essay, and that's why Stanford University has always been my first choice, and if you admit me to Stanford, I'll go. Well, when I saw that, do you know what I said to that applicant? Bye-bye. Good luck at Stanford. Clearly, you're not interested in us. So be very careful when you send an essay that it is going to the school that you want it to go to. That's very important. And make sure you now don't become obsessive about this, but make sure you truly do read and reread essays or other written information that you're going to send. We all make mistakes, and the admissions committee is not going to penalize you for one or two errors. We all make mistakes without knowing it. We inadvertently, sometimes I have, my colleague, Ms. Debbie, and others have had to say, Dr. Don, you made a typo there. And I didn't notice it. My brain automatically corrected it in my mind, and I didn't see it. That's understandable. But if your essays or written communication is just riddled with mistakes, typographical errors, grammatical errors, you will be denied outright. I can tell you that right now. You need to be very careful that what you send. Some students make a mistake and send their first draft of an essay accidentally rather than the final draft. Well, the admissions office doesn't know that, and they're going to read what you send. So again, be very careful here. We've already covered this. Asking questions you could answer for yourself. The main questions you should always be asking of the admissions office or someone with whom you interact, a faculty member, an alumnus, a student, an admissions person, are questions that you would like more information about something. You've read it, but you have more questions. Do not ask something you can answer for yourself. And lastly, leaving something unaddressed in your application that or making excuses about something. There's a difference between explanation of a particular situation and making excuses. By excuses, I mean, oh, life has been so hard. Poor me. I'm just, I've had such a hard life. No. That is not appropriate here. But there are reasonable explanations. And if you believe there's something about your application, your background, that the admissions committee is going to have a question about, then you address that up front. Don't leave it for them to try to figure out what's going on. They're not going to take the time to do that usually. So if you have something in your credentials, in your application packet that needs to be explained, please address it. And Ms. Debbie and I are very much able to help you in that regard. We've done that already with some of our students that we worked with Astute last year. By the way, if I'm going to brag here for just a minute, all of those students got in, and I think most all, if not all, received scholarships. So we can help with this if this would be something you would want us to. Okay, now let's move on to talk about three components here quickly. Because we're getting to the close. I want to try to finish here in 5 to 7 minutes. I see we have some questions coming in. This is wonderful. So let's quickly go here. With essays and recommenders, here's a few early tips. Please answer the questions. Now, you would say, Dr. Don, of course I'm going to do that. Well, you might be surprised how many times students will start answering a question and then they go off in some other direction to talk about something that we didn't ask. Do not provide information you were not asked to provide, and do not leave out information you were asked to provide. Here again, you may wish you could share something else. You may wish you could share more, but the instructions are, here's the word limit, and here's what we want you to talk about, and that's what you talk about. Follow that word limit, please. Now, you don't have to be right on the amount. If it's 500 words, you don't have to have exactly 500, but please don't give 700. That shows you can't follow directions. If you have an optional essay, write it. If they give you a chance to write about something else where they give you the topics, or they say one of two other things. Is there something else you'd like to tell us about yourself? By all means, do that. Or this could be the place in the application where you will be asked to explain something about your application that might be less competitive. So when the optional essay is offered, take advantage of it. Keep in touch with your recommenders before the deadline. It's not a bad idea to just remind them about a month out. I just wanted to check in. Thank you again for your willingness to do this for me. I so greatly appreciate it. Just a gentle reminder that the deadline is such and such. Just a gentle nudge to remind them that it's coming, and thank them afterward when it becomes apparent to you. When the admissions committee lets you know that your application is complete, that means that the recommenders did their thing. They did what they were supposed to do. Thank them. And if you get admitted, make sure to circle back with them. And among others you may be thanking, let them know that you appreciated what they did for you. Let's quickly talk about grades and test scores. Again, if your academic situation is not as competitive or there's an issue, explain that. But remember, again, just as we said, there's a difference between arrogance and confidence. There's also a difference between explaining and making excuses. We can help you with that again in our work with our clients at Astute. Spend time preparing. We've said this. Make sure that you do spend some time. Now, generally speaking, students from India do very well on the SAT, ACT, TOEFL, IELTS. They generally do very well, but not all students do. Some students are better test takers than others. It has nothing to do with your level of intelligence or your ability to do academic work at the undergraduate level. Some folks just, I was one of those folks. I was not geared to take standardized tests. That was never my strong suit, but I had other things that balanced that out. But spend the time that you need to do the best you can to prepare for these tests should you have to take them. And something else, generally speaking, don't take a particular test more than three. Once or twice is plenty. After 3 times, again, it starts looking like you're desperate, like you're just taking this over and over and over again. Most research shows that after the 3rd time, your score is not going to change all that much. It might change slightly, but not in huge. It's not going to go up in a huge amount. So be careful. Don't feel if the test part of your application is a weaker part, then that's where you use an optional essay or you make an explanation at some point when you're given the opportunity to do so. Okay, let's move to our final part here about responding. What happens if some of these things occur where you are not admitted, but rather you're placed on a waiting list or you're denied? Now, obviously, no applicant likes to hear this. This is disappointing. Of course, I went through it. When I applied for my PhD program the first time, I was not admitted, but I reapplied, and you know what happened? I got in the second time, and not only did I get in, they waived my whole first year of coursework. They brought me in as a second-year student, having told me the first year that they weren't able to admit. So at any rate, the first thing, do not take this personally. This is not a personal attack on you. This is not an evaluation of your potential for undergraduate success. Not at all. An admissions dean is working with a limited number of openings, and in many cases, a much larger number of applicants. They can't admit everyone. It's just not possible. So this is not a personal critique of you. Secondly, always request feedback. If they're willing to offer you any feedback on why you were waiting, they may ask you to do something, then do it. If you're given information, again, that you don't understand or you may not even agree with, do not argue. This is not the time to get mad and start yelling and, no. This, you do what you're told. You do whatever they say, you say, thank you for that feedback. Make sure you understand it. And if you're supposed to do something after that feedback is given, do it. Respond as quickly as is appropriate once you've heard this news or once you've been told what else you need to do. Get back to them quickly. Let them know how much you appreciate that they took the time to share this information with you and respond appropriately. Now, remember this. If you are waitlisted, many applicants think if I'm waitlisted, I am this close to being denied. No, you are this close to being admitted. It's the exact opposite. If they put you on the waiting list, that means they're interested in you. They are very interested in your candidacy, or they wouldn't do this. So you need to remember this is, and if you behave appropriately, you don't get upset, you don't lose your cool, you contact them, let them know you're still interested, you do whatever it is they're wanting you to do. We can help you if you're working with us on responding in a situation like this. I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 waitlisted candidates end up getting admitted either for that year or for the following year. I used to admit waitlisted candidates at the end of the cycle that I knew I could not admit any longer for that year, but they were so cooperative, they were so positive, they were so interested. I said to them, you know what? We're not going to make you apply again. You're admitted for the next year. If you choose to wait, we will bring you in the following year. And many of them did that. So remember, a wait list is not horrible. It's a positive. Neither is being denied. Once again, as I just said, admissions deans cannot admit everyone. It's not possible. So being denied doesn't mean that you are a bad applicant or that you're a non-competitive applicant. Not by any means. Consider reapplying. And here again, contrary to what many applicants think, they believe if they reapply having been denied, they're just going to be denied again. Absolutely false. That's a myth. The chances of getting admitted as a reapplicant go up, not down. Okay, we got to move along here very quickly. If you've enjoyed this webinar and perhaps the one we shared on July 13th, we have 3 more coming up here. September 14th, October 12th, November 9th. We're going to continue to get deeper and deeper into the application checklist for you and the actual application process. In fact, we're covering so much information for that one that we've divided it into 2 parts. Ms. Debbie will be joining me again for all of these. We absolutely encourage you and invite you to come back and join us again at that time. Lastly, very quickly, Astute Academy has graciously invited me to come to join them in India in December. In the first 2 weeks, I will be returning. I had the privilege of being in India this past January. Unfortunately, I was not able to stay as long as I had anticipated, but I will be coming back, hopefully meeting with prospective students, parents, maybe at some educational institutions as Astute would like me to. The schedule is still being determined, but maybe by the time we get to our October and November webinars, we'll have maybe a little more information on what we're doing. But I am delighted to and honored to be invited back to join Dr. Dioris and his amazing team. And let me just say, before I turn the microphone now over to Dr. Dioris, what a privilege. I mean this, he never asked me to say this, never, and he never knows when I'm going to say it, but I have to say it. It has been an absolute delight to work with Astute. This is one of the premier, if not the premier organization for what they do in India, but beyond India, worldwide. It has been an absolute pleasure. Dr. Dioris is a phenomenal resource on so many educationally related endeavors at the high school, the master's, the doctoral level, the medical field, physician assistant, associate programs, MR, and more and more. And his team are excellent. So I encourage you to continue to follow the Astute Academy. You will not be disappointed. With that, Dr. Dioris, thank you so much for giving Ms. Debbie and I the privilege of being here again with you and with your students today. We trust this information will be helpful. It looks like several questions are coming in, so I'm going to stop talking now and turn the microphone back over to you to guide us through what questions we have received. Thank you so much.
Great, excellent webinar. Thanks, Dr. Dawn and Debbie. And really, this information you will not find anywhere on the internet, because this is based on the experience at the start with what I said it. And we are going to continue 3 more webinars after this. So let's start with the questions. Please
Okay.
start typing. Those who are interested, want to know more, please start typing in question and answer. I will take one by one. The first question which the student is asking, what should be the length of words in LOR, letter of recommendation? What is the word limit?
That's an excellent question. Usually, there is not an actual word limit for a letter of recommendation, and the instructions to the recommender will let them know how long it should be. In most cases, the length of the letter is 1.5 to 2 pages on average. But when you provide information to the admissions committee on the recommenders, excuse me, that you're going to use, then they will reach out to those recommenders and tell them how long their letter needs to be. Excellent question.
Another question, should the recommendation be from the same relevant field teacher?
Dr. Dioris, can you help me one more
Yeah,
time?
so whether we require, suppose we are going for medical field, do you require a recommendation from the biology teacher? So whichever specialization you are going, is the recommendation letter should be the same stream teacher?
Another very good question. No, the letter does not necessarily have to be from someone who works in the field or the career path that you are thinking about. Why? It's as Ms. Debbie said earlier, a recommender is someone who knows you in two ways, long enough and well enough. If that's not someone in the field that you're going into, do not use them. Make sure that recommender knows you. This is not, now, when you get out of college, let's say you're applying to medical school. Now, at that point, yes, that might become more of an issue with your recommender. But at this stage, going from your high school to college, the best recommenders are those that know you long enough and well enough.
In the Common App allows you to choose out of different essay topics. So how we should be choosing which essay should be taking?
I'm going to take this first, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Debbie in case I missed something or if she would like to add anything, since she has worked closely with this as well. In my opinion, whichever option you choose would be one that resonates with you, that is something you believe, you feel passionate about, or you really have something you'd like to say. Again, the admissions committee is not testing you. There's not a rank order. Oh, if this person answers this of the questions, that's the best one. Absolutely not. They're giving you a choice solely for the purpose of letting you have some opportunity to discuss what is most important to you. So I would say there's no right or wrong here. It's a matter of which of one of these, one or two of them, you might pick two to write something on initially, just to see how it goes, and then narrow it down to the one that you're going to choose. Ms. Debbie, did I cover that? Is there anything else that I missed?
No, I think that sounds great. The questions are designed, again, for you to connect with one and share as much about yourself as you can. So there's no question that's better than another. And again, picking a question that you really enjoy writing about. And like Dr. Don said, you might try one or two and then focus on one at the very end. And that's how the admissions committee will get to know you.
Another follow-up question on the same, can we reuse the same essay for other university?
Well, the Common App, if you're asking for the Common Application, my understanding is that essay that you choose goes to every single institution that you're applying to. Now, there are supplemental essays that certain individual universities will ask of you once they've gotten your Common Application essay. And so if that's what we're talking, with that in mind, if the supplemental essay, let's just say from the University of Michigan, is identical or very similar to a supplemental essay from the University of Virginia, then yes, you can reuse some information, but with this caveat or with this condition, make sure you are answering the question for that university. So if you put the essay from University of Michigan and the essay from University of Virginia together, they're almost identical. Yes, then you could do it. But make sure that you are answering those questions for that university, not for another one.
And another question, are the application from the non-US citizens are treated differently as compared to US citizens?
In one way, absolutely not. In terms of the evaluation of applicants, I can tell you, because I evaluated international applicants for 28 years, there was no difference whatsoever in terms of the evaluation process for an international applicant and a U.S. applicant. Now, where there was a slight difference was that in most of the institutions I served, I was told that I could bring in a certain percentage of international students into the class. In other words, when I worked at Chicago Booth, when I worked at Columbia, I might be told, Don, for next fall, out of the incoming class of 700 students, we would like 20% of them to be international and 80% to be U.S. citizens or permanent residents. So that meant I could admit 140 international students. So I had to keep that in mind. But in terms of how applicants are evaluated, absolutely no difference at all.
Is personal statement important in application?
Oh, am I glad that you asked that question? Absolutely, yes. This is one of the most important parts of the application, and for this reason, or for these reasons. At the undergraduate level, most of the time, you are not going to have an opportunity to meet a member of the admissions committee in an interview, like you might at the master's, and like you absolutely will if you're a doctoral candidate. You will be interviewing in person with the committee. But at the high school level, at the undergraduate level, that is not true. So how are they going to get to know you as an applicant? One of the primary ways to hear from you is your personal statement. Absolutely. This is almost, I often, Ms. Debbie and I both suggest to applicants that you actually write this pretending that you're sitting in a room with the admissions committee and you're talking with them. You're speaking with them. One of the best compliments I ever got when I wrote my book was from my dear friend, my former boss at Columbia, Dr. Darlene Bailey. I didn't know what she was going to say, but when she wrote the foreword for my book, she said, when I read this book, I felt like I could hear Don talking with me. That's what Ms. Debbie and I are helping to do. And the Astute team, all of us, we are helping if we're working with you, we are helping you to present your, not ours, your best essay, because this is the chance for the admissions committee to hear from you. Yes, it is and a personal statement can offset a less competitive academic profile or fewer undergraduate activities, high school activities. Yes, it absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question. It does make a difference. Yes.
Another very interesting question. So if we do all the things that you briefed us will we be able to get the university we are interested in? So whatever we have been briefing, if they do all these things, whether they will get the university they are interested in.
So in other words, that is an interesting question, Dr. Dioris. And
yes.
I'm going to again invite Ms. Debbie to comment after I take a stab at this and make sure I covered things. The question I believe we're being asked is, if we do everything Ms. Debbie and Dr. Don suggested, will we get into our first choice university, the top university that we want? I wish I could say yes, that is absolutely going to happen. But I have to be honest, I can't say that. Now, 90% of the time, I think that could be true. I believe I have worked with, I work with clients, both with the Astute Academy, and then Ms. Debbie and I work with separate clients that come through our organization that we have here in the States. And 97% of all those we've worked with have gotten into one or more of their top choices. So there's a generally good chance of getting in. But here again, depending on the level of notoriety or prestige of the university, as we know, there are some universities in the United States, in the Ivy League, and even others that have an incoming class of freshmen, let's say of 1,000 students, but they might get 15,000 applications. Well, that just and something else. Most of the students applying to those institutions have the qualifications to at least be considered. So it stands to reason that those institutions, if they admitted 15,000 students, the dean of admissions would be fired and imprisoned. There's no way that could ever happen. So we can't guarantee, but what we can say is this. If you do follow what we have suggested based on our experience over the years, your chances go up considerably over what they would if you didn't follow what we suggested. Ms. Debbie, did I anything I missed there?
I think that's right. And our goal for students is for you to present the best application that you can. And this is why you have a list of schools and not just one or two that you apply to. And so we would help you through this process. And like Dr. Don said, certainly if you do these things, we believe your application will be positively noticed. And many times you are admitted to these types of institutions.
Thank you. With your permission, I would like to maybe add something on this.
Oh, please.
Because
please.
this is, yeah. So I always tell the students that you get admission based on your profile, not what you desire. You may desire, I want to have a Stanford or I want to have Harvard. Not every student is going to be admitted in Stanford and Harvard. However, maybe you may desire to do that. We need to really create a profile for that. And that is why we ask the students to start at 9th standard so that we can really help the student build a profiling part of it. And ultimately, as Dr. Donald Martin said, there are great universities everywhere in United States. It is not a Stanford or Harvard or MIT, the top 5 or top 10 universities. It's a big number. But nobody can guarantee any admissions into any specific university. We create a basket, and that is why university selection is so critical, where to apply. And as Dr. Donald Martin says, we start with maybe 40, 50 university list, and we narrowed out. That is a massive exercise where my profile fits into that. It is not desire. It is the really fitting it and getting a chances, and we have to create a basket. So I hope I'll be able to give some clarity. Yeah.
Oh, that's extremely helpful, Dr. Dioris. Thank you very much.
Is it possible to apply to 2 different programs in the same university?
Yes, but typically that would not be done at the undergraduate level. That would be done more at the master's level or maybe the PhD, although less likely. The place where some folks will apply to more than one program at the same university is at the graduate level. I rarely see an institution where you have 2 different application processes at the undergraduate level. It's usually one application for whatever those programs may be that are offered on that campus. So I would say no, you apply to one university or college at the undergraduate level.
There are very few universities in a common application, they give the option of second choice or third choice. And most of the time it is related. Suppose I'm going for computer science, they may have the similar program, a computer engineering, or basically computer science, different variant.
Oh, yeah, okay,
and they may want to take it. So very few universities, but what Dr. Donald Martin says is true. There are few universities which even take undecided. They have the option as undecided, even very premier universities. where if you are not really sure what the things which are there, you can still enter. But those numbers are very, very limited. Today, it is most of the applications, they would like you to decide where you want to do. And it is that process we will help you. So identification of the career is also very much critical part.
And just one final thing there. My response had to do with whether an applicant was allowed to submit two separate applications to one university at the undergraduate level. That is not, you would submit one application,
yes,
and then you could determine some selection of programs within that.
Yes.
But you're not permitted to, let's say you chose to apply to where I live at Northwestern University, you would be permitted one application only
yes,
at the undergraduate level.
Yes, that's true. Yes, yes. So can I ask a college why I was denied admission and reapply again?
Absolutely, yes. The latter part, by all means, you can reapply. You can also ask them. Now, sadly, it seems to me over the past 20 to 25 years, fewer and fewer institutions are willing to offer information on why you were denied. I find that extremely troubling, but that seems to be the reality. It could be that if you are denied, there may be a section called Q&A, most often asked questions from applicants who were denied, where they give you some information. But yes, you can absolutely reapply. Now, if you do, it's possible that that university may have a new question for you that would say something like, what have you done, in your opinion, to improve your application or enhance or update your credentials since your first application? And remember, oftentimes your chances of getting in the second time around go up, not down.
Another question, what do you do if you notice a mistake in your college application? You submitted the application and you made some mistakes.
Depending on what the mistake is, let's say it's a typographical error, I would do nothing. I would leave that alone. You don't need to call attention. In fact, some of the mistakes you might notice, they might not notice. So if it's a typo or there's a one grammatical error or something, I would say don't. If you reported information inadvertently that was incorrect, like you talked about your overall academic performance in the 12th standard came in at a 99 and it was a 92, something like that, you should respond to them and say, I inadvertently typed the wrong information here, and I just wanted you to know I just noticed this and wanted to ask that it be updated in my application. And believe me, doing that does not in any way cause you to become suspect or to be denied. In fact, your credibility goes up if you're correcting something like that. And here again, if you're working with a student and you notice something like this, we would be able to help to advise you, okay, this is a time that you do want to let them know, or this is not something you need to let them know about.
Now, there is another question. In case the admissions that are denied, is there a limit to number of times that we can apply? And during the reapply, do we have to complete the process again?
Let me answer the latter part of that first. Yes, you do have to go through the whole process again. There's no shortening unless they somehow tell you that in their instructions. But I've never seen a situation where an applicant doesn't go through the whole process again. In terms of how many times to apply, if you are denied a second time in a row, at that point, if you're working with us, we would want to have a conversation with you about how you can reach out to the university for some honest, candid feedback. We did admit students on occasion who applied a third time. We did. It was less likely that we would admit someone who was applying the third time. The second time, quite often. So if the denial comes the second time, we would want to, and this is your obvious, this is by far your first choice, then we'd have some specific recommendations of what to do before you decide whether or not you're going to apply a third time.
While submitting application, my recommender has not submitted the letter of recommendations, and deadlines have passed. Can I change my recommender and send another letter of recommendation to the university?
That's an excellent question. One thing to hopefully keep in mind that might make you feel a little better is recommenders can be late in getting their letters in. If the deadline is December 1st and they submit their letters on December 15th, that's absolutely fine. Keep in mind, there is a bit of a lag time between when applications are due and when the admissions committee begins to meet and when all decisions are finalized. So if the recommender is, most likely what will happen is after the deadline, you'll get an email message from the institution saying, we've received this, and this from you. We're still waiting to receive this letter of recommendation. At that point, you reach out to your recommender. If we're working with astute, we might be able to help you in reaching out to that person as well, reminding them that this is very important. Can they please get their letter in? And then if they do not respond, if they don't get the letter in, then yes, you could tell the admissions committee that your recommender has not been responding. May you have permission to have another letter of recommendation come in? And I would think 100% of the time they will say yes, especially where this is nothing that you did. This wasn't your mistake. This wasn't your lack. And they would allow that. But most of the time, that very rarely happens where you have to get another person. Usually, it's more likely you'll get notified that the letter did not come in. You'll reach out to the recommender, and they will absolutely get it in within the next few days.
Yeah, most of the universities now have a portal. They will give you the access of the user ID and password, and you can see the checklist there. What is submitted, what is not submitted. And even through the common applications, when you are submitting the applications, you can actually view what is pending and you can take the really part of it.
Good point.
Will my counselor mistake on recommendation letter harm my application?
Well, I'm thinking there could be two possible definitions of mistake here. One, the recommender's letter is very poorly crafted. There are mistakes in it. Or they, secondly, provide misinformation for some reason or get confused and send a wrong letter. If it's the first, the quality of a letter of recommendation from the recommender will not be attributed to the applicant. That you had nothing to do with that. So that might not look good for the recommender, but that's not going to hurt you. If it turns out that this recommender, this guidance counselor or your advisor was writing several letters of recommendation and they sent the wrong one, then they would be given an opportunity to resend the correct letter. And again, that will not reflect negatively on you. It backs things up just a little bit in terms of when they can evaluate your application, but that will not be used against you.
Yeah. Can we make the changes to application after submitting?
Can you make a change to an application? Usually, no. Once you push that send button, what you have submitted is what they're going to see. Now, one exception, if there is additional new information comes in, you get an award, you win a contest, something else happens for you that you did not know about when you were applying and when you submitted, then you can contact the admissions office and say, may I add this information, please, to my application. It just happened. But usually you will, some universities even say, be sure that you have everything ready before you push this button, because once you do, that's it. You're not allowed to go back in and start changing things around. So the only time you can change is if you have updates of something you did not know when you initially applied.
We'll take the last question.
Okay.
Can I pay tuition fees in installments?
Yes, in some cases you will be permitted to pay in installments. I'll ask Ms. Debbie to chime in here in a minute, in case even from her own personal experience she may have some additional information here. But yes, it's my understanding that many institutions make various options available for payment. It's not all you must pay everything at one time and that's it. I think there are options and various payment plans, if you will, that are given so that various families, students have a little bit of flexibility there. Ms. Debbie, did I cover that accurately?
Yes, you would want to speak to your school individually and talk about the different options. Most do it on the semester, but some obviously do have payment plans that you can do. So you would just want to work that out with your individual institution.
Yeah, that is available, and you need to pay the semester-wise fee. It is not a yearly like here in India. So we have to pay the semester. So for the number of credits or number of subjects we are enrolled, only that much fees. So it is not a yearly component as it is coming. So it is divided into two semesters. So I really thank Dr. Donald Martin and Debbie for such an excellent session, and really appreciate all the students and the parents for asking for such a fantastic questions. Dr. Donald Martin loves the questions, and he's
I do.
very, very happy when we get a quality questions. It is always we feel really this webinar becomes really worth. And really thank you again for providing such a fantastic information. You will not find such information. I always repeat this, is anywhere on the internet. It is based on so many, more than I think 42 years of experience working with the students. And that is such a rich experience Dr. Donald Martin takes. Thank you very much, and wish everybody all the best.